Hello, welcome back to the channel. Romell, Private Investigator. I hope everybody's I hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing very well. Some of you guys might be out on vacations and all that sort of thing. Good. The weather's better, at least here anyway. So what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to get a little personal. Just a little personal, but it's to help you out. It's to help you out. I'm going to talk today about what a private investigator does when they are engaged in something that may happen to you. Now, don't be too quick to turn. It's not a point of whether or not you have a family member or friend that's been arrested, as much as it is having a sense of what to do in the event something like that does happen to you. If an investigator's involved, how does that whole thing pan out? Is it what the attorney says to you about the investigator? Or is it something else? Maybe some of your friends will talk about they had an investigator and they didn't like this or they did like that and all that sort of thing. It's always good when you have these situations to hear it from, I'm not a horse, but you know the expression, to hear it from someone who knows, has the direct experience and who has been able to help a considerable amount of people, attorneys, private citizens, and so forth. This is important stuff. Some of you may think you already know it. You'd be surprised. Okay, so let me start out by saying this. If you get arrested, more than likely, you're going to have, at some point, an attorney. Now, that attorney may be an attorney of your choice. If you have the funds to do something like that, bless you. Because a lot of times, whether you're innocent or not, trust me, you're going to need it. The other thing is, there are those of you who may not have the funds. And so now you're in one of those situations where you're trying to figure out, well, gee, this is a court-appointed attorney, a legal aid attorney. There are all kinds of attorneys that are out there, and there are a lot of tremendous misconceptions about what the attorneys do. You'd be surprised how many people have said to me that they're sitting in jail. They said to me, well, my attorney's a court-appointed attorney, so what good is he going to do for me? And all I can say to you is this: you would be surprised. There's a lot of misinformation out there. That's what this all boils down to. Tremendous amount of misinformation. So when you have an attorney, what's important is keep an eye out on the interaction between the attorney and the investigator. In my view, it is critical. They don't have to be kissing cousins. Old expression. But you understand what I'm saying. You feel me? Okay, I'm being naughty again. In any event, in these situations, when you have a visible, respected communication between your attorney and the investigator, chances are things will fare better for you. Here's why. You have some attorneys who are not confident in, let's say, an investigator that may be engaged. And I don't mean confident in terms of them not being able to accomplish anything, but just the mere fact that, well, you're an investigator, I'm an attorney. Sometimes you have that type of situation. It's not good, because they are working interchangeably and together if they're working the way they should be, or at least the way I choose to work when I'm working. And so what happens is the attorney is going to talk to you, the client, The attorney may or may not divulge information to family members. That's going to depend on your age, and that's going to depend on what you have to say about that. It is not always the wise thing to do, especially information that can be very helpful in either having charges reduced to a lesser included offense, or a situation where there may be a means of having your matter dismissed, whether it be a legal reason or some information that's been discovered by the investigator that the police have not put forward for one reason or another, or have not been aware of for one reason or another. Of course, if the police don't know it, the prosecutor generally wouldn't know it either. Now, so what happens is the investigator is going to speak with you at a point. A good investigator, and normally there are family members around. Everybody wants to know what's going on. They're concerned. Their loved one is locked up. Not a good place to be. And so they're overly concerned, some even overly anxious. So a good investigator is going to separate the family as best that can be done. There are some things you can let the family know because it's not going to hurt the case, left, right, or otherwise. But there are other things you want to keep under the vest, as the expression goes. And so this is sort of where an investigator comes in. An investigator is going to separate the family. It's going to speak to people individually. A good investigator is going to want to know who you are, what you do, how often you do it, where you do it, why you do it, and all of that sort of thing. It's critical to get a sense of who you are, to get a sense of which direction the investigation is going to move in addition to those things. It's called discovery for those of you who haven't had the experience. Those things that come from the prosecutor's office, basically showing the different things that they've done and are perhaps continuing to do associated with the charges against you. Persons who've said something by police canvassing or some video cameras and all of that sort of thing. It all comes in to play. So when you're in a situation like that and investigators trying to make that separation, cooperate with the investigator. Trust me, he or she, they know what they're doing. And the reason is, as best possible, to eliminate the possibility of a bias. Not all of your relatives are crazy about you. And then some, it's overkill. You can do no wrong. If you blew your nose in front of them, somebody else made the sound. I don't mean, it gets that way. I've seen it. I see it. I see it all the time. It's nothing unusual. And then you have people who are in total denial. And what happens is this gives the investigator an opportunity to get a feel of the family, get a feel of the person, be it you or someone else. They get that feel that they can work with. They get a sense of when they do talk to other people who may have been engaged in whatever took place, they have a sense of how to talk to them. They're not talking over them. They're not talking over them. They're not talking through them, and they're not talking at them. They're literally talking with them. And that's critical, because if you're in any of those other places, it can make it very challenging to get information from a person. Everybody's trying to figure out, well, what are you here for? What are you really trying to do? What is your true agenda? Are you trying to make an innocent person guilty, or guilty person innocent? All of these things fluctuate through the mind. And then, of course, now there's another thing. It is not unusual when someone gets arrested, whether they did something or not, to misrepresent the truth. And here's where another factor comes in that an investigator tends to help the family with. I caution you, you've heard it 1,000,001 times. If you should get arrested, do not say anything to the police. I didn't make this up. This is not a phrase. I can't imagine an attorney that would tell you otherwise. Attorneys will encourage you not to even testify in a felony matter, not to testify before the grand jury. And there are reasons for it. You know when they say you have a right to remain silent? That's a constitutional right, and you do have that right. That right does not suggest that you are guilty, nor does it suggest that you're innocent. It only says one thing, that you are invoking your right to silence. And you can do that. The police cannot, well, let me put it to you like this. If somebody's coercing you, of course, you can break that silence. I'm not saying you should. I'm saying that can happen. It's been known to happen. It's nothing new at all. It's unfortunate, but it's not new. Happens probably more often than most people think. Again, it's unfortunate. So here's how that works. Let's say there's an incident. Somebody gets shot. You happen to be nearby. Anybody in the vicinity of a shot is a possible person of interest, or at least someone to talk to, which is basically what a person of interest is generally starts out as being. Now, the police are talking to you. Let's say further down the block, the police catch up with you. Someone said they remember you being somewhere in the vicinity. They catch up with you a little further down the block. However, in the meantime, on the way down the block, you ran into your buddy. Your buddy heard a few things. Your buddy heard the shots. Your buddy heard some arguing. This one was going to shoot that one. That was going to shoot this one, so forth and so on. So what your buddy does is, yeah, man, I heard some arguing, man. I'm not sure who it was, but I heard them arguing. So-and-so said he's going to put a cap in his keister. You know what I'm trying to say here. So what happens is the police finally catch up with you, and they're talking to you, and not knowing any better, they're asking you, do you know anything about what happened? We heard that you were on the scene. Is there anything you could do to help us out? So you say, well, I know somebody got shot. They got shot about 5 times. Maybe this is what your buddy said. Yeah, they got shot about 5 times. And it was on the corner of Bruce and Luce. Sorry about that. Can't help myself. It was on the corner of an intersection. Hey, the police say, weren't you at that intersection as well? Yes. Did you hear the shots? Yes, I heard the shots. I wasn't sure how many shots there was, but there were 5 shots. So you're excited. You're not really paying that much attention to the police officer, because in your mind, you're helping the police officer. In the police officer's mind, he or she is trying to get enough information to see whether or not they have to do anything additional to you or with you. Long story short, you start saying you talk too much. So what it does is the police say, well, listen, you were there. Now, here's another thing you need to know. And I'm sorry to cut myself. There's another thing you need to know. What the police can use is something called subterfuge. And I'm going to make it simple for you. It's deceit. Deceit is lying. The police can lie to you. You can't lie to the police. That's perjury. But the police can lie to you. And the presumption is that if the police lie to you to get information and you are the guilty person, and you're not a guilty person, then whatever you say will openly be truthful. But what happens is people get frightened. The police will tell you, listen, we have a person. Now, they have to be careful how far they go with it. But they can say, listen, we have a person that it's our understanding that puts you on the scene next to where we have found spent bullet casings. Now that's a serious place to be. So if you're answering all of these questions, what you're doing is, remember, when you get arrested, that doesn't mean you're guilty. For the most part, you will spend some degree of time in jail until you can get bonded out or released in your own recognizances. But you're going to get handcuffed. You're going to be taken for a ride. You ain't going to like the ride. They find all the bumps. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. They find all the bumps on the way to the precinct. I shouldn't have said that, but it's true. I'm sorry. So again, in any way, these are things that you need to know. And as it plays out, the police officer's writing down in his or her memo book their interview with you, or their what they would call an investigative interview. They're writing down their information, you see. And so what you have to understand, how many times have you texted someone? You sent a simple text and it was misunderstood. You meant one thing, but it was interpreted another way. That same thing happens when an officer is conducting an interview. They are going to summarize what you say. Unless you say something that is just so incriminating, that's something they're going to want to write word for word. It's imperative that they do that. Outside of that, it's a summation. Now, as you go before the system, that summation may be enough to create the probable cause that puts you before a grand jury. And the grand jury doesn't have to go any further than what the police officer did. But the grand jury is just saying, well, yeah, I think the police officer was right. We have reasonable grounds to believe. And that's the message. Reasonable grounds to believe. It doesn't mean he most likely did it, but it appears he could have done it based on things that happen at the scene and your big mouth. So again, you have to be careful in situations like that. Now, to get back to the family, there's a reason why an investigator, and I've had this happen oftentimes, will not divulge information to family members. And that's something that refers to, you've heard this before too, attorney-client privilege. So working for the attorney, I have what's referred to as attorney-client privilege in my investigative process. As long as I don't violate it by sharing the information with someone other than the attorney. Of course, the defendant, that's a no-brainer. But other than the attorney. So what happens is sometimes you get some information, you share it with the family member. To the family member, it sounds great. To you, you know there are further tests that have to be put in place for this to be the type of information that may cause for the person to be, the charge to be dismissed. But in the minds of someone who doesn't know, what happens is they're listening and they're like, oh, wow, my baby's going to get out of jail. Now, your baby might be 25, your baby might be 35. In any event, my baby's going to get out of jail. That's not always so. But what happens is you start sharing that information with other people. One of those persons may be someone associated with the complainant, the person who's initially bringing the charges to begin with. They may be a little unhappy with that. They start sharing that information with other people. That will hurt the case unquestionably. So these are, well, this is among several reasons why you have to be careful, even like after speaking with the police, and let's say you're released in your own recognizance or you're bonded out and you're talking to other people, you have to be careful what you tell them. There's an old expression that's very prevalent to these very times. Loose lips sink ships. So you can't tell everything that you hear. A lot of things should be kept, as I said a bit earlier, under the vest. What the investigator is going to do after canvassing the family, investigators are going to hit the streets. Investigators are going to talk to different people who know you a particular way. If you happen to go to church, the investigator will stop in to see the pastor. This happens. I've done it. And I have had situations where going through that type of thing, I've come across some people who knew the other party, the complainant. And the complainant had a reputation of doing wrongful things to others, blaming other people for things that actually did not occur, so forth and so on. And sometimes what happens is other people who are aware of that will sometimes come forward. Sometimes a little timid with that type of thing, but they will come forward. And when they do, that oftentimes can be helpful in the case at hand. And I've had cases like that where people have come forward. And hey, I'm talking Crips, Bloods, Latin Kings. I've had that type of thing happen. So, you know, the old saying, me and my old sayings, right? Honor among thieves. There is some here and there. You would be surprised. Of course, there's some people that will go to their grave with a wrongdoing. You know, that's life. That's how things are out here. So in any event, what I'm going to do now is thank you for taking the time to listen to what I've had to say. I particularly appreciate all you new subscribers as well as existing subscribers. I will be putting out a lot more information in a lot of different things that I'm sure will help somebody out there. Dream with purpose, act with intent. Be well.